Hello everyone, this is Vinny from High Tech Legion. Today we'll be unboxing and taking a look at one of Cooler Master's 400 Performance Series mid-tower cases. It's called the Silencio 450. It's a performance chassis. It's part of their performance chassis actually in the 400 series. It's called the Silencio for a reason. It's set up to be silent. It has 120 millimeter, 800 RPM silent fans installed. It's a soundproof design, and it has a switchable front door. This top section right here, you can switch the hinges from left to right or right to left, so you can open the door from either side, which is really nice, especially when it's at your desktop. You want to be able to open it from the side that's most convenient. It has an exposed front I/O panel, which I really like, which means I don't have to open that door every single time I need to plug something in. And it has on the front, it has USB 3.0. It has your standard mic and headphone jacks, plus it has a 2.0, and it has a card reader, which I like as well. Comes in handy. Moving around to the back side, we have 3 photos of the case. We have a front shot. They talk about the easy access front I/O panel here, and then an inside shot, and here they talk about cable management, routing options, and they show the holes for your cable management on the motherboard tray. And they also talk about tool-free design on the 5.25 optical drive base, and also they point out the fact that we have a removable hard drive cage at the bottom, which is there to support the longer VGA cards, right, or video cards. And then a photo on the back side. They have rear retaining holes for water cooling, 2 grommeted at the top. Bottom mounted power supply, 7 expansion slots, and some ventilation on the right, plus your 120 millimeter naturally at the top. On the right side we have our specifications. It's only available in one color, which is black. Material is steel with plastic front bezel. The dimensions are 194 by 451.5 by 495 millimeters, which equates to 5.64 by 17.77 by 19.49 inches. The motherboard type is micro ATX and standard ATX. It'll fit either or. We have 3 exposed 3.5 drive bays. We have a 2.5 SATA hard drive bay, which is hidden. And we have the front I/O panel, right, which we talked about earlier, right, 3.0 times 1. USB 2.0 times 1, mic and headphone, and 1 SD card reader. This case can support 140 millimeter fan times 1 at the rear, 120 millimeter fan times 1, 800 RPM silent fan. Can support also 80 and 90 millimeter fan times 1. Excuse me. You have your power supply, standard ATX PS2. It's optional at the bottom. Maximum compatibility for CPU coolers is 6.16 inches or 156.5 millimeters. Pretty good size. And VGA card length is 11.06 inches or 281 millimeters, and that equates to, oh, and I'm sorry, and 16.61 inch or 422 millimeters without the hard drive cage, which we talked about being removable. Okay, let's get into the unboxing and take a look at this case up close. Chassis comes really nicely wrapped in a plastic bag with some really strong, thick styrofoam inserts both top and bottom to protect your investment. But also at the top we have a installation manual done in black and white. Okay, starting with our front bezel, right? We have a really nice look to it. It's raised in the center and kind of concave around the edges. Gives it a really nice look. The case is done in a matte black finish, or semi-gloss as some would call, and the front around the front bezel is a nice shiny gloss frame that actually accents the look of the case. It makes it look really rich looking. As you notice, we have our I/O panel, which is totally visible and accessible, even with the front door being closed. That's a nice feature, not having to open the front door to plug in your USB or headphone and mic. On the left side we have 3.0 USB. Then we have the two audio ports for mic and headphone. To the right of that we have USB 2.0, and then we have a card reader. And below, in the center at the bottom, we have the Cooler Master logo emblazoned in a nice gloss black. Opening up the top door, we have our three 5.25 ODD bays, or optical drive bays. Below that we have a 3.5 external bay. We have a reset switch here. Just to make note, this door is omnidirectional. You can remove the hinge from the left, move it to the right, and you can have this either open left to right or right to left, whichever you choose, depending on how you lay the case out at your desktop. So that's a nice feature. Up at the top, we have your on-off button. So again, we don't have to open the door to turn the computer on. Just click the on-off button. And your data lights are right above the reset. So they can flash all day and you don't have to be bothered with that as well once the door is closed. I like that feature. We have vents running up both the left and right side, halfway up the bezel. And they're 3/4 of an inch across, and like I said, run halfway up the bezel on both sides, and that's to pull in air from the front intake 120 millimeter, which is behind the front bezel, which we'll take a look at later. The left and right sides are identical. Plain black doors. Both black doors have acoustic material on the inside to help silence any noise generated by hard drives or fans. And both doors come with thumb screws for easy removal. Let's move around and take a look at the back. On the back side, we have the two grommeted holes that I talked about earlier for water cooling or cable pass-through if need be. Below that we have 120 millimeter 800 RPM exhaust fan. Off to the left is your spot for your I/O panel for your motherboard and I/O dust cover. We have a nice vented area here to help assist in keeping your video cards cool. And here we have the 7 expansion slots, and below that the spot for your bottom mounted power supply. Let's move on and take a look at the inside. I've already taken the liberty of removing the back door, but both doors are easily removed with a few simple turns of both thumb screws at the top and bottom. Removing those. A simple pull on the handle that's embedded in the door, and the cover comes right out. One thing I wanted to point out here is, as you can see, the door cover itself is covered in a very dense black acoustic material. This is put there for sound deadening purposes, and it's made to absorb any sound created inside the chassis from fans or the like, pumps or whatever you may have in there that might make some noise. It's a very nice feature, and it being so dense, this material being so dense, it doesn't have to be very thick. This material is approximately 1/8 of an inch thick, so it will not hamper or interfere with any large coolers that come out close to the door. It's very nice. Put that down. Let's take a look inside. We have our parts bag strapped here. Inside the parts bag is some cable ties, quite a few of them too. Let's see, 3, 6, 8. 8 cable ties for cable management on the back side of the motherboard tray. We have 2 rubber noise isolation pieces that go on the back side of the power supply. That's to cushion the power supply against and eliminate vibration and noise. That's a nice feature that they included that. We have 2 replacement pieces for the 7 expansion slots. These are not, the ones that are here are punched out, so you'll have to bend these to remove them. But they give you 2 to replace any you take out that you want to put back. So be cognizant of that. If you remove a bunch of them, you have 2 replacements here to replace those ones that you're not able to put back. We have a case speaker. And an assortment of screws. We have screws for fastening down the power supply, the bottom mounted power supply. We have 9 standoffs for your motherboard, and in this package I'm noticing now we have a tiny little socket for the motherboard standoffs, and it has a Phillips on one side and socket on the other, so you can put these standoffs in using a Phillips screwdriver, not have to find a little wrench or a pair of pliers to do it with, and do it properly. And they make mention of that right here. Standoff socket. Very nice feature. Then we have the rest of the screws all clearly marked for both the insulation of the motherboard onto the standoffs and also for securing your hard drives and optical drives. And that's it. Let's move on to, well, before we move on, the 5.25 day, they talk about toolless on that. There is only one toolless mechanism. It's up at the top. So if you're going to put more than one drive in here, it'll require screws for the other two. It has a spot for 3. Or if you decide to move one specific drive to a different spot, you can move this along with it, this toolless feature, right? I just moved it to the second spot. The hard drive cage below will hold 5 hard drives. This top section of the cage right here is removable. You have one screw at the back to take out. You have 2 down here and 1 up in the corner, and this hard drive cage will slide out, and that will give you the additional room for your larger video cards. And it'll also allow, you'll still have 2 spots down here at the bottom for hard drives. And right above that is your spot for your 3.5 external. If you so choose to put in another card reader or maybe 3.5 fan controller or something of that nature, you have a spot there for that. And the bottom 2 bays, hard drive bays, are both toolless. So there they've included the toolless feature on both of those bays. You have your fan connections coming from the front, both 4-pin Molex as well as 3-pin for the fan header on your motherboard, and the same thing at the back side for your 120mm. You have the option of 4-pin Molex or fan header. The cable management we talked about, they have some really, let me move this out of the way. They have some really nice size holes in the motherboard tray. Exceptionally large down here for your power supply cables. It's excellent. And we have several on the side here. And alongside the hard drive cages are also some routing areas for cables. We have an exceptionally large cutout so that if you're going to put in an aftermarket cooler, it can be easily accessed from the back. So you don't have to take out the motherboard to do that. And our cables look really nicely sleeved. We have the 3.0, USB 3.0, no header on that, so this one will have to pass through one of those grommeted areas at the back and plug into the back side of the motherboard for that front USB 3.0. We have standard USB, and we have our audio, high definition audio cables and the AC97. All of these are very well done, sleeved very nicely. Then we have our braided connections. These cables are braided to keep them from getting in your way during install, making them easier to manage. You have your power and reset, power switch, HDD LED, and reset switch. So all your motherboard cables are here. Move this out of the way. See if I can move in for a little closer look. Give me a sec and I'll take a little closer look at the bottom. Hopefully you can see that okay. We have some rubber grommets pre-installed, 4 of them at the bottom to help support the power supply off the bottom of the case floor. And we also have a nice vented area complete with filters to keep out any dust for your bottom mounted power supply. Okay, moving to the back side of the motherboard tray. Right, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. One is that all of the cable routing holes are nicely beveled. Right, the steel is actually rolled over to keep you from cutting yourself on every hole in the chassis. Very nice. The bottom one, like I said earlier, for your power supply cables, really large. One thing I am noticing though is the space between the back of the motherboard tray and the back door itself measures 3/8 of an inch to the outside. If I take into consideration this bevel at the bottom, I've got maybe 1/4 of an inch of room at the bottom, and I can squeeze by on the sides with 3/8 of an inch. And up here behind the hard drive and ODD bays, I have 1/2 inch up here of space, and down here I have a plethora of room. I have actually 1.5 inches of depth in here, which I'm probably going to have to utilize to do some good cable management. Of course, it'll be very difficult to do it behind the tray, being that the tray is so close to the door. Moving to the bottom of the chassis of the Silencio 450, we have 4 really nice case feet. They're 5/8 of an inch long, so they'll lift the chassis off the floor quite a bit. And combined with the amount of space on the inside, it'll actually lift your power supply 3/4 of an inch off the floor, giving you plenty of room for excellent airflow through the power supply. This area also comes with a fine mesh filter. It's easily removed for washing. It goes back in place, just held in with some clips. If you'll notice, you see some holes here, right? You can actually install a hard drive to the floor, an additional hard drive, or underneath the hard drive cage there are also holes here which would mount an SSD to the bottom of the hard drive cage. Will mount to the floor as well. And here where you lift off your front bezel, you have also additional airflow to your 120 millimeter up front, which will give you good airflow through the case as well. Before we go into the actual install, let's have a look behind the front bezel, as I promised, and see what's going on there. Okay. Here you can see the 120 millimeter pre-installed intake. Nice removable, washable filter, very sturdy. This will last a long time. Slides right in and out. Locks into position. And you have your 3.5 drive bay. And your spot up top for the 5.25 optical drives, the 3 of them. The one thing I did want to point out, and I don't believe I did earlier, is now you can get a better look at this door. There's 4 screws here that hold this material in place, and they also hold the door to the hinge on the left side. You take out these 4 screws, and you take out 2 screws on the inside, and this whole hinged area comes out and can be switched from left to right or right to left, like I said earlier, whichever way you choose. But it does take some doing. There's a piece right here that pops out. So once you switch it over to this side, you take this piece and pop it back in this side to cover the area that it came out of. Pretty simple and very effective, actually. So I thought I'd show you that before we go into the install. Let me pop this back on. Some really good locks on that front bezel, so that's not going anywhere. Okay, let's move on to the install.